Our world wasn't always like this. My grandparents have told me stories about days of freedom and independence, an age where everyone had something special about them and they were able to share that unique something with the rest of the world. There were musicians, artists, and writers creating incredible pieces of art, music, and literature. There were magicians, jugglers, and actors willing to perform for large crowds of people. Everyone was so happy and carefree, loving life and doing what they could to savor the good times. However, all that changed when a deranged doctor showed up out of nowhere with a series of devices to eliminate all that. He used the devices to destroy the independence of our people and mutilate the animals, all while leaving the cities in ruins. The once beautiful landscape of our planet had been reduced to a wasteland, leaving behind nothing but soil with barely enough nutrients to grow fruit. The once diverse culture of people has been replaced with people that wear the same clothes and eat the same things day in and day out. Anyone who doesn't live by this lifestyle is frowned upon and punished by our dictator, the doctor. My grandparents were the only ones with knowledge of the days before the doctor. They had to be kept in hiding so they couldn't be executed. The doctor didn't want anyone to know the truth of the world's past and how he rose to power. So he began a secret worldwide campaign to get rid of all those who had memories of that age. To escape the clutches of the doctor, my grandparents began to live with us, and it was in our basement where they found salvation. I would go down there every day to visit them and give them their meals. We would talk about the age of independence, and before I went back upstairs, they would always tell me the same thing. You were destined to do great things. What they are is up to you. Those words have been ringing in my head since they passed away. It's been 5 years since they died, and I've been wondering what great things I'd be doing. And I wasn't sure until that fateful day. I was walking in the market to get some fruit for my parents when I heard an uproar happening on the south side of the square. I rushed over to where the commotion was, pushing my way through the crowds of people. Once I made it to the front of the crowd, I saw 2 people having rope tied around their necks. People seemed to approve of the hanging of these people, throwing mud at them and calling them horrible names like traitorous swine. That's when I realized the 2 people being hung were wearing tie-dye suits. They must have been protesting against the doctor by going out in public and wearing bright rainbow-stained suits. The crowd was hushed as the executioner walked towards the lever on the right-hand side of the platform. Wrapping his hand around the lever, he paused for a few seconds as one of the protesters began to yell at him. "You may take our lives, but you'll never take our independence, you bat—" He never got to finish that sentence as the executioner pulled the lever and the 2 protesters dropped below the platform. You could hear their necks snap as their bodies fell. They just hung there afterwards, cold and lifeless. The crowd applauded and cheered as the protesters were sent to their deaths. A few minutes passed and the commotion died down. I stood there staring at the protesters, my grandparents' words repeated in my head. You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you. I knew what I had to do. I had to rebel against the doctor and start a revolution. I stayed up late that night planning my scheme. I needed to know how to start it, how to get everyone's attention. I had a few ideas in my head, but I couldn't choose which one to use. I'd have to give it more thought during the day before I could make my decision. All I could do was lay on my tattered bed wide awake, hoping to fall asleep soon. The next day my parents brought me to a restaurant in the square for lunch. It had recently opened and was very popular for some reason. Usually restaurants aren't allowed to be built unless approved by the doctor himself. It rarely happened, so the food there must have been amazing to get past him. It even had an all-day breakfast, something my father loved. I think the main reason it got approved and my parents wanted to eat there was because the restaurant served meat. The animals mutated because the doctor's devices weren't allowed to be eaten, as it would kill anyone who ate their flesh. However, this restaurant had found a way to cleanse the meat of the harsh chemicals in order to make them edible. We sat down at our table and began to look through the menu. After a few minutes, our waiter came to take our orders. I ordered the traditional breakfast, weary of what it would taste like. From what I saw, everyone seemed to love the dish, so I thought I'd order it. 25 minutes passed and we finally got our food. All 3 of us ordered the same thing, the traditional breakfast. I looked down at my plate and what I saw didn't help my appetite. The meat, along with the hen buds, were discolored, having what appeared to be a light greenish hue to them. My bread was normal, but the rest looked distasteful. My parents began to eat right away and looked like they were enjoying it a lot. I picked up my knife and cut into the meat. It was tender and juicy, so I thought it wouldn't be as bad as I thought it would be. And I put the piece I cut off into my mouth and began to chew. My eyes widened as I reached for my napkin and spat out the meat. It tasted horrid, like someone marinated it in sewage. I decided to eat the hen buds next. I began to eat a forkful of them and just spat it out just as fast. It tasted worse than the meat. I grabbed the bread to cleanse my mouth of the disgusting taste. I ate slowly as I could and pretended I was full when I ate both slices. That night I was in my bed wide awake again. I finally had a way to rebel against the doctor. I was going to share with the world my opinion of the restaurant's food. I was going to wear eye-catching clothing under my normal gray overcoat as I make my way to the square. Once I'm on the hanging platform, I'll rip my overcoat off, put on a hat, and shout my opinion through a megaphone. I couldn't tell my parents about it as they would just stop me. It was something I had to do alone. It was 11:45 a.m. when I entered the square. I was going to rebel at noon exactly, and nothing was going to stop me. I was doing this not only for myself, but my grandparents and the world. The square was busy as usual, with many people talking to one another or buying whatever fruits and vegetables they could. This was the perfect day for the beginning of my revolution. I nervously waited until 11:55 to make my way to the hanging platform. Once it was time, I stood up and walked towards it. Images of the old world flashed in my head, reminding me of what I was about to fight for. I saw my grandparents sitting on a park bench watching a mother bird feed her young. I saw children playing in a grassy field having the time of their lives. Then I saw my mother and father standing in front of a statue. It was a statue of me, with a plaque under it saying, "In honor of the world's greatest revolutionary." Once I was on the platform, I took a deep breath as my grandparents' words repeated once again in my head. "You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you." I ripped off my bland gray overcoat to show off my yellow shirt and white pants. I put on my red top hat and pulled out my megaphone from my backpack. I turned it on as I began to speak into it. "Everyone, listen up!" People in the square fell silent and began to turn their heads in my direction, looking confused. "There is more to life than this simple and bland lifestyle. We can have our own unique talents and preferences if we try. It's easy to do, I assure you." A police car pulled into the square and 2 officers stepped out. They stared at me and began to walk in my direction, looking angrier than ever. I knew I had to talk fast. "Please, listen to me. Rebel against the doctor and claim your independence." One of the officers swatted the megaphone from my hand and stepped on it, shattering it into pieces. He then grabbed my arms and pinned them against my back. I tried in vain to release myself, but his grip was too strong. The other officer clenched his hand into a fist and struck me across the face. I fell to the ground with a thud and began to fall unconscious. The last thing I remember was hearing the words my grandparents had always told me when I would go back upstairs in my head. "You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you." I was sitting alone in a restaurant in the square. I ordered the traditional breakfast and began to eat it eagerly once it arrived. I took a bite out of the meat and spat it out without hesitation. It tasted disgusting. I began to wipe my mouth and I saw a young man wearing a yellow shirt, white pants, and a red top hat enter the restaurant. I recognized him. He was the same boy who rebelled against the doctor last week. He looked at me and gave me a big grin. He began to walk towards me with the same snickering smile on his face. I gave him a slight smile, but frowned a split second later, hoping he would stay away from me. He stood next to my table, staring at me. I looked up at him and decided to start a conversation. "May I help you, son?" I asked him. "I am Sam. Sam I am. Do you like green eggs and ham?"